I have to pay spousal support of $2,000 per month, continue paying the mortgage, cover $1,000 in child support, and maintain health insurance for my child until she reaches adulthood. If she goes to college, I'll be responsible for those expenses too. This was declared by the judge. This decision will cost me over $6,500 monthly. My wife has slept with many lawyers at her firm, and now they're taking advantage of me. My name is Ethan Marquez, and my ex-wife, Sophie, short for Sophia, has made my life a nightmare. Our daughter, Victoria, is my pride and joy. Calling her daddy's little girl would be an understatement. Whenever she was free, I'd take her to various places. She told the judge she wanted me to be her guardian, but he ignored her. The whole court proceeding was a farce, with the child support amount being excessively high. Sophie was working and making money. I shouldn't have to support her and pay for everything else. I was definitely being cheated, and the judge was part of it. However, I wasn't going to take it lying down. In fact, I was already planning how to make her regret crossing me. I can be quite vindictive when I feel wronged. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, specifically in Lansing, Illinois, I learned how to hurt people. Some folks call me an entrepreneur. I just see myself as someone who seizes opportunities. Admittedly, not all of these opportunities were legal when I was younger. Now, I'm in real estate, owning several rental houses, vending machines, and another business that would come in handy for paying back my dear ex-wife. I own a coin-changing business similar to Coinstar, with machines all over Chicagoland and northern Indiana. This would let me pay her $2,000 in spousal support entirely in change. She'd have to take it to the bank, where they'd insist on having it all rolled. Maybe one of her lawyer buddies can help her count and roll them. Sophie stayed home with Victoria until she started school, then worked part-time for a few years. Later, she decided to become a paralegal, took courses for 2 years, and hit the job market with a resume. After about 6 weeks, she was hired by a large law firm in the area. Sophie is smart, but I believe her looks, even at 32, helped her get the job. She was one of many paralegals at the firm, but it didn't take long for her to advance. An up-and-coming attorney noticed her and made her his assistant. Now I wonder if she was self-serving back then. As her foolish husband, I fully supported her career choice. She'd come home tired but smiling, and now I wonder why she was exhausted and what those smiles were for. We lived in a nice house in Oak Forest, Illinois, a typical working-class suburb of Chicago. As she began socializing more with younger lawyers and senior partners, her attitude changed. She started saying we needed to move to a better neighborhood, claiming we made good money and she worked at a prestigious law firm, so we should show the world our success. I loved our house. We renovated it and made it our own. I didn't want or need to live in one of the expensive suburbs. After 2 years of her nagging, I agreed, but insisted we keep our house and rent it out, adding it to my other properties. We bought a house on the north side of Chicago in Wilmette. To afford the $900,000 mansion, we had to take out a jumbo loan. It wasn't on the shores of Lake Michigan, but it was close enough. She furnished it with new furniture to her liking, but I never felt comfortable there. In fact, thinking about it now, I believe it was the beginning of the end for us. We wanted different things out of life. I wanted to be the humble, unnoticed millionaire next door. She wanted to flaunt her wealth and live that lifestyle. Now, back to the judge's ruling in our divorce decree. Over the next month, I started making my plans. My daughter would get child support, but Sophie wouldn't see any of it. It would be in an account just for Victoria, so she could get whatever she needed or wanted. She would also have the best health insurance I could find. Sophie, on the other hand, would only get catastrophic insurance, with a very high deductible. She'd have to pay for all her medical services unless she became seriously ill. Then the policy would kick in after 30 days. When it was time to pay Sophie the first installment of spousal support, an armored truck pulled up to the mansion. The driver knocked on the door, and when she appeared, she wasn't alone. One of her buddies was with her. The driver informed her he was delivering the first month's payment. She was confused, not understanding why an armored truck was parked in the driveway. By this time, a few curious neighbors had emerged from their McMansions, perhaps thinking she'd won the lottery. They watched as 2 guys brought bag after bag of change into the front room, dumping them on the Italian marble floor. The sound was amazing, even from across the street where I stood by my car, recording everything on my phone. As the truck pulled away, She saw me and started yelling. I just waved and yelled back, "Hope you enjoy your money," then climbed into my truck and drove off. I wasn't surprised when a man approached me on Tuesday and asked if I was Ethan D'Angelo. I ignored him at first, but he insisted, "Excuse me, sir, are you Ethan D'Angelo?" When I still didn't respond, he took a picture of me with his phone and offered a subpoena. When I didn't accept it, he threw it on the ground, said, "You've been served," and walked away. After making sure he was gone, I picked it up. I was due in court the following Wednesday, giving me a week to finalize all my preparations. I spent the week making calls, setting up appointments, and preparing for court. I met up with Victoria for lunch, and she was seething with anger at her mother. She couldn't believe what a trash her mother had become. Victoria told her mother again that she wanted to live with me, but Sophie refused. I promised her that I would go back to the judge, even if it meant risking jail. "Don't do anything crazy, Daddy. It's not worth it," she urged me. "Don't worry, I won't. But I'll be very vocal, and it might land me in jail." "Your mom will love that," I replied. "Don't worry about me. I've set up a trust for you. Uncle Ted will manage it until you're an adult. He'll ensure you get everything you need, but your mother gets nothing. It's all for you," I explained. "Of course, Daddy. She doesn't deserve anything," she said firmly. "That's my girl, strong and growing into a fine young adult." "Dad, I'm going to court with you. I'll insist on living with you," she declared. "I don't know if it'll make a difference, but we'll try," I responded. On Wednesday, Victoria, my attorney, and I were waiting in the courtroom. Sophie strolled in with her lawyer and sneered, "Hey, follow the rules. You can't just do whatever you want, you'll see." When the judge called my name, Victoria marched up to the podium. "Excuse me, miss, this case is about Ethan Marquez," the judge said. "I'm his daughter, and I want to live with my dad, not my awful mother," she said, glaring at Sophie. "Young lady, you will not speak like that in my courtroom. Your custodial parent has already been decided," the judge scolded her. "But I'm 15. I should have a say in where I live," she demanded. "There were allegations of an inappropriate relationship with your father, so I ruled in favor of your mother," he replied. I glanced at Sophie and saw her smirking. My lawyer stepped forward. "Your Honor, we were not made aware of any charges or evidence presented at previous hearings." "I refer to the psychiatrist's report. I stand by my decision," the judge stated. 4 months ago, Victoria was dealing with our messy divorce and school issues, so we took her to a psychiatrist. There must have been something in those records that Sophie thought would sway the judge. I never behaved inappropriately with my daughter. Sophie was trying to falsely accuse me of inappropriate behavior. My blood pressure rose. I couldn't believe Sophie would lie so viciously. The judge wouldn't let me explain. I glared at him, thinking he'd pay for this. Sophie's law firm must have orchestrated everything. Let's see how this ends. My vengeful side was kicking in. Sophie's lawyer spoke. "We request the court to find Ethan Marquez in contempt." My lawyer was just as angry, seeing there would be no justice today. "Your Honor, my client has complied with all divorce decree terms. There are no grounds for contempt," he argued. Sophie's lawyer countered, "My client hasn't received child support from Mr. Marquez." "That's correct," my lawyer responded. "The child support was given directly to his daughter. You can ask her yourself." The judge looked at Victoria, who nodded with a smile. "We have canceled checks for insurance and the mortgage," my lawyer added. I glanced at Sophie and her lawyer. They were scrambling for a response. "Your Honor, paying in change is causing my client undue hardship. Can we request future payments by check?" her lawyer asked. The judge, finally able to speak, said, "That seems reasonable." But before he could continue, my lawyer interjected, "Your Honor, may I ask a question?" "Go ahead," the judge replied. "Is the Chicago Police Department part of the city's legal system?" The judge, puzzled, answered, "Of course." "Then why," my lawyer continued, "if my client's car is impounded, can't he write a check? He must pay with cash or credit." The judge stuttered, If the police, part of the legal system, don't accept checks, how can my client be required to pay in checks?" my lawyer pressed. The judge, now flustered, retorted, "Because this is my court and I decide." I'd had enough. I stood up, shouting, "You're biased, trying to please my wife's law firm. Did she sleep with you too?" The judge exploded, "Mr. Marquez, I find you in contempt and sentence you to 6 months in Cook County Jail unless you apologize and comply with my conditions." "Who are you, the king of this kangaroo court?" I yelled. The judge, shocked, ordered, "Bailiff, take him into custody." I looked at Sophie and her lawyer. They were stunned. "Good luck getting money, loser," I said with a smile. She had no idea how much her life was about to change. I was taken to a cell, strip-searched, and transferred to prison. Prison is the right word. It felt like one. 2 guards immediately questioned me about my disrespect toward the judge. I wasn't afraid of prison. At 6 feet 4 inches and 255 pounds, working on rental properties had kept me fit. Plus, I had some experience from juvie as a teenager. I was processed and led to my cell. Ignoring the noise and shouting, I stayed in the shadows, determined to keep a low profile. At the evening meal, I got my tray, stood against the wall, and ate while watching the scumbags pretending to be tough. Then, amidst the noise, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in decades. "Tex?" My old street friends used to call me Tex back when I was a juvenile delinquent. Tex Raymond, also known as Razor, approached me and said, "What are you doing here?" As he walked over, many eyes followed him and turned towards me. I set my tray down and embraced him, interlocking my right arm with his. "Razor, you handsome devil. How the hell are you?" I asked. "Well, considering I'm here, not great. I bet it's the same for you." "What did you do?" he replied. "Basically told the judge he was an idiot," I said. "That'll do it," he said, laughing. "How long are you in for?" 6 months, unless I apologize to that son of a trash." "So yeah, 6 months," I responded. We chatted and some of the prisoners watched us. Razor filled me in on the prison dynamics and promised to watch my back. I agreed, grateful for an ally. We reminisced about old times. "So what are you going to do about your ex, her lovers, and the judge?" he asked after I told him everything. Razor knew me from my younger years. Revenge was part of my DNA back then. That's why I got the nickname Tex, as in, don't mess with Texas. Anyone who did paid for it and warned others. "What happened with the judge?" he asked. "He took my little girl away from me, even though she asked to live with me," I said, my anger rising. "Oh no, what are you going to do about it?" Razor asked. "I've got some plans." "I figured I'd end up here, so I started planning weeks ago," I replied. "Anything I can help with?" he offered. "Maybe, but for now, just having a friend here is enough," I said. "I'll introduce you to some of my buddies. It's good to have people who've got your back," Razor said. After some introductions, Razor shared stories about our days running around Lansing. There were a few chuckles, but mostly nods. Our stories weren't much different from theirs. That night, I lay in my bunk staring at the wall, asking myself how it had come to this. I started reflecting on my life. My childhood was rough by most standards. My father was an abusive drunk, and my mom had no backbone, even when my dad started hitting me. I spent most of my time on the streets, meeting a group of guys in similar situations. We weren't a gang, though we pretended to be. We were just stupid kids dealing with our problems. Lansing's crime rate was high, and we didn't help that statistic. We mostly committed minor stuff, but did steal cars a few times, which landed me in prison. Looking back, it was the best thing that happened to me. Sure, it was hard, but it gave me time to think about my life's direction. I vowed to do something meaningful when I got out. By 20, I had saved enough to buy a foreclosed house in my neighborhood. It became the first of many houses I renovated and rented out. At 22, I was in a club hoping for a lucky break. I don't even remember the club's name. It changed so many times over the following decade before being torn down for condos. That night, I thought I was really lucky. I met Sophie. We hit it off immediately. Her life was different from mine. She had just moved to Chicago to live with a friend, having grown up in Seymour, Indiana, best known as John Cougar Mellencamp's hometown. By the time Sophie was born, he was already famous and had moved away, so she never met him. Growing up in a small Midwestern town gave her an attitude toward life that I found appealing. I guess opposites attract. We married a year later, and a year after that, Victoria was born, named after Sophie's mom. I bought a house in Oak Forest to rent out, but Sophie loved it and wanted to make it our home. We spent the next 10 years fixing it up. Those were the best 10 years of my life. We worked on home projects together, watched our daughter grow up, and hosted neighborhood barbecues. It was the American dream. Then Sophie got a job at a law firm, and things changed, especially her attitude. The simple life no longer suited her. She needed expensive clothes and jewelry. Neighborhood barbecues were replaced by dinners at fancy restaurants with her law firm colleagues. She also started making derogatory comments about Southside Chicagoans. Sure, the Southside has its problems, but Sophie, a country girl, acted like she was above everyone else. We fought over her attitude more than once. Soon, she started pushing for us to move to the north side. 3 years ago, we moved. The school system was better, but Victoria felt the snobbish attitude of her north side classmates, making school unbearable. She kept saying she wanted to go back home. And so did I, but Sophie ignored us. She was where she wanted to be. The event that triggered the divorce was an evening like many others. Sophie called around 6:30, saying she was going to a dance with paralegals from work. However, I tracked her phone and decided to check on her. I stood in the shadows and watched. She was dancing, but not with her colleagues. She was surrounded by guys from the club, practically grinding on them. Around 9:15, I went to the bathroom. While I was in a stall, 2 guys walked in. "Damn, Joe, you're getting turned on with Sophie on the dance floor." "Thought you were going to do it right there," said one. "Yeah, she's a wild one," Joe replied. "You know it. She's coming home with me tonight. We can finally have some proper fun instead of 20 minutes in the office or the back seat of my car," Joe boasted. "Immediate relief is nice, but it doesn't compare to the real experience," the other guy agreed. "We're going to work all night tonight," Joe bragged. "Maybe next week, it'll be my turn," the other guy said as they left. I know guys like to brag, but this sounded more genuine. When I came out of the restroom, I saw Sophie in the arms of one of the guys, making out on the dance floor. Around 9:30, she texted me saying she had drunk too much and didn't feel safe. She claimed she was going to spend the night at Rachel's, one of the other paralegals from her office. I texted her back, "Sure," and she replied, "I'm sorry." She would be sorry, all right. I watched as she grabbed her purse and left the club, hand in hand with a young lawyer from her office. They were so engrossed in each other that she didn't notice me following them. They jumped into his Lexus and started kissing and groping each other. Anger bubbled up inside me, but then my Southside vindictiveness took over, and I calmed down, plotting my next move. I followed them to his building, and once they were inside, headed back to the mansion. When I got there, I explained to Victoria that we were leaving and told her to pack everything she wanted because we weren't coming back. She was excited but worried, asking, "What about Mom?" I told her, "There are other guys taking care of her now," and she understood perfectly. It took us about 3 hours to pack everything into the back of my truck. Fortunately, our house in Oak Forest had recently been vacated, so we had a place to go. Around 11 o'clock the next day, Saturday, Sophie called my cell phone. "Ethan, what's going on? Where are you?" she demanded. "Home," was all I said. It took her a couple of seconds to understand. "Why?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "I don't know you anymore, and I don't want to. Victoria is with me because she doesn't want to live with you in that house anymore," I replied. Sophie, unsure if I knew about her affair, tried to play it cool. "Come on, Ethan. Just because you don't like living in luxury doesn't mean you can walk away and take our daughter with you," she argued. "No, Sophie, but a wife cheating on me is a reason to leave. Expect divorce papers next week," I told her. She sighed, and in her usual derogatory tone said, "You Southsider piece of trash. You have no idea the hell you're bringing upon yourself. My firm will eat you alive." "That may be true, but in the end, I will prevail. You haven't yet seen my full wrath," I warned her. For the next 6 months, Sophie made no attempt at reconciliation. She even called to boast about seeing various lawyers. I didn't care. There was no turning back. I had to get Victoria back, but to do that, she had to return to school. Victoria informed me that Sophie was out almost every night until at least midnight. She also told me Sophie constantly criticized me, saying I had no class and that Victoria should aim to marry a rich guy from her school to live in luxury. Victoria always defended me and told her mom she wanted to go back to Oak Forest. Now, lying here in jail, Sophie probably thinks she's won. But I wasn't giving up. I wondered if she thought about how she was going to pay the mortgage, health insurance, and spousal support. She likely believed a few days in jail would make me come to my senses. No, it just gave me more time to plan my revenge. Something happened on Thursday afternoon that changed everything. 2 guards ordered me to follow them. They took me to a video conference room. "What is this? If I'm speaking to the judge, I want my lawyer present," I demanded. They shoved me into the room and said, "Sit down. You're not talking to the judge. You're being sentenced." They slammed the door shut. I screamed for them to let me out. After about 10 minutes of thrashing around, the door opened and 6 cellmates were let in. I knew what they were planning, and I was determined to fight back. "Don't mess with me. You'll regret it," I warned. One of them lunged at me, and I punched him square in the nose, hearing it crack. Then they all rushed me. I fought back, swinging, kicking, elbowing, and pinning them against the walls. The biggest one, 6 inches taller than me, got me in a chokehold. I kept fighting until I lost consciousness. When I woke up in the infirmary, I was bloody, bruised, and in severe pain. I knew what they had done. They needed to establish dominance, and they did it brutally. By the light coming through the window, I realized it was morning. The nurse approached, and I glared at her with hatred for this whole system that took my child, forced me to pay so my ex-wife could live in the mansion, and now put me in jail to teach me a lesson. The nurse looked at me, seeing the hatred in my eyes. "I'm here to help you, not hurt you. You've been beaten badly. They said you got into a fight, but we both know the truth. I can help you get better, or you can lie here and suffer. It's your choice," she said. Her last words sounded indifferent, but I sensed she wanted to help. I tried to smile and said, "Sorry. You've been through a traumatic event. I can only imagine your rage," she replied. She left and came back with a plate of breakfast, unclenching one of my hands. "Thank you," I said. "You're welcome," she replied. As I ate, I knew what I was going to do. "Can I ask a favor?" I said. "It depends," she replied. "One of the prisoners, Raymond Tanner, is a friend I grew up with. Can he visit me?" "Well, see," she said noncommittally. Later that afternoon, she managed to get permission, and Razor came to see me. "Oh, damn," he said when he saw me. He knew I wouldn't let this go. I described the 6 guys and 2 guards who attacked me. "I need their full names, not just their nicknames," I said. "Oh, damn," he repeated. "What are you going to do?" "An eye for an eye, but with a twist," I replied. He saw the look in my eyes and understood. It wouldn't be pretty, and innocent people might get hurt. "I'll try to get the names," he said. "That's all I need. I'll handle the rest," I told him. We talked some more before he was escorted back to his cell. Sleep that night was restless. I couldn't get comfortable, strapped to the bed as I was. The next day, Razor came back with the list. He asked again, "What are you going to do?" "The less you know, the better," I told him. "Oh no," he muttered. Sunday brought both a good and bad surprise. Sophie arrived with Victoria. Sophie was the first to speak. "So I see you found common ground with your fellow misfits?" she sneered. "What do you want?" I growled. Victoria insisted we come. "Are you ready to apologize and be reasonable yet?" she asked. "No way. And what is this about me and Victoria? You know I'd never do anything to her," I retorted. "How do I know?" "She's unusually attached to you," she replied smugly. "You're a piece of trash. Why don't you go back to your buddies and have them look up your A, so you can see how much trash is in you? Just so you know, it's happened before, and they loved it," she gloated. "Get the hell out of here and send Victoria in. I'm sick of talking to you," I snapped. She smiled in that nasty way only a bitch could, thinking she had me cornered. When they brought Victoria in, she cried upon seeing me bandaged and battered. "Honey, don't cry. Things look worse than they are," I tried to reassure her. "Oh, Daddy, I was scared when I saw you like that. You look like you've been in an accident," she sobbed. "Don't worry about me, sweetheart. I'm tougher than I look," I said, trying to comfort her. "Dad, I hate Mom for doing this to you. I hate her for making me live with her and for saying you did inappropriate things to me. That's total BS," she declared. "I know, Victoria," I said. "Don't call me that again," she snapped. "I'm Vicky now. I don't want to be associated with my mom or her family." That's what I told her, and I declared I wouldn't talk to her again if I didn't have to, and I haven't since Monday. She keeps trying to be nice to me, but I ignore her, Vicky said defiantly. "Vicky," I said using her new name, "you look more like me than you realize. I couldn't be prouder." She smiled. We talked about little things. Then I asked, "Could you do something for me?" "Anything, Dad," she replied. I handed her the list Razor had made for me, and she immediately tucked it into her bra. "Give this to Uncle Ted and tell him to see me as soon as possible," I instructed. My brother Ted was 3 years younger than me. He grew up with the same abusive, drunken father, but I protected him as best I could, taking the brunt of the abuse to keep him safe. Ted was a smart kid who got into computers early on. We chatted a bit longer until Sophie returned and said, "Victoria, we have to go." Vicky didn't say a word to her, just got up, hugged me, and walked away. Sophie said to me, "Your daughter is just as stubborn as you are." I just smiled as she turned and left. On Tuesday, Ted came to visit. He was shocked at my appearance. "You look much better than last Friday," I joked. "I'm glad I waited," he replied, trying to lighten the mood. Then he spoke to me in our made-up language from childhood, a code we used to talk about Mom and Dad without them understanding. Now we used it for private conversations. "Vicky gave me a list," he said. "I did some preliminary research. What are you looking for?" "Addresses of wives or regular girlfriends," I answered. He looked at me, then said, "Oh no." "That's all you have to do," I said, switching back to our code. "Then give it to Gummy and tell him to visit me without the list." Gummy was the nickname of one of our old gang members who still lived in Lansing. "I can do that. Anything else?" Ted asked. "No, that'll be enough. But don't be a stranger. I could use a familiar face now and then," I said. "Aren't you getting out soon?" he asked. "Not if I don't apologize, and you know me better than that," I replied. "You've always been stubborn," he stated. "Yeah, and it kept you safe from Dad's drunken wrath," I said. He realized I was right and just smiled. "I'll stop by in the next 2 weeks to see if you need anything else," he promised. "That would be great," I said. That same week, I was moved back to my regular cell. Razor informed me that things were going to get tense, and there would be consequences. The looks I got from the 2 guards and the 6 prisoners suggested they were ready to retaliate. They didn't know they were the ones about to be put in their place. Gummy came to visit and handed me a note from Ted. "Did you hear what they did to me?" I asked. "Yeah, I heard," he replied. Ted must have filled him in. "Return the favor, but to their loved ones. Just no DNA. Use Steely Dan or his more flexible cousins," I instructed. He nodded, understanding what I meant. "All on the same day, preferably at the same time. Make sure they tell their loved ones. Don't mess with Texas," I added. "I'll get my friends to help," he said, and walked away. I knew he would carry out my plan in a way that wouldn't leave any trace back to us, but would deliver a clear message. A week passed and I heard nothing. I was also waiting for another visit from Vicky. I didn't want to see Sophie, but I knew she had to be there if Vicky came. On Tuesday morning, I noticed 2 security guards were absent. Tuesday wasn't usually their day off. One of the 6 prisoners looked distracted and upset. It must have happened yesterday, I thought. I asked Razor to spread the message, "Don't mess with Texas." Soon, several prisoners started calling me Tex. After a couple of days, the 6 prisoners began throwing angry glances my way. 2 of the absent guards returned and glared at me. Razor's friends, however, had my back. When one of the 6 approached me, 8 of my new friends surrounded us. The guy sneered, "You're a piece of trash. I don't know how you did it, but my girlfriend dumped me. She said she didn't want to risk getting hurt again. Then she told me, 'Don't mess with Texas.'" I just smiled and said, "Sounds like good advice. I told you all not to mess with me. Now your women know how it feels. An eye for an eye with a twist. The twist is that you hurt me, and I hurt those you care about. Tell them next time it'll be their mothers." His eyes widened and he turned back to his buddies. Shortly afterward, 2 guards approached me, their faces twisted with hostility. "Who do you think you are? We're going to make your stay here a living hell," one of them snarled. "Well then, I guess your wives better get used to being taken in the A. They might even enjoy it," I shot back. Enraged, one guard lunged at me, fists flying. I didn't resist, letting him beat me until another guard pulled him off. The other inmates witnessed the whole thing, and I was sure the cameras caught it too. Back in the infirmary, I was greeted by Beth, the nurse who had helped me before. "So we've got a troublemaker here, huh?" she remarked, eyeing my bruises. "I didn't throw any punches. The guard just started hitting me," I explained. "There will be an investigation this time. Too many witnesses. Hell probably lose his job," she said as she bandaged me up. "One less trash security guard," I muttered. "These guards are supposed to keep you safe," she replied. "He certainly didn't keep me safe last time. More than that, he let it happen," I countered. Beth told me I'd have to stay overnight for observation. I wondered if she just wanted another look at my wrinkled face. The guard was suspended pending the investigation, and the other guard kept giving me dirty looks but didn't dare say anything. Perhaps he realized the consequences of messing with me. It had been 3 weeks since Vicky last visited, and I was anxious. Ted finally came and told me that Sophie was refusing to bring Vicky to see me. That only fueled my anger. My ex-wife was keeping my daughter from me. At the end of the month, Sophie showed up, almost leaving Vicky at home. But Vicky wouldn't get out of the car, no matter how much Sophie screamed and yelled. When Sophie stormed in, she was already furious. "Your daughter is impossible. She hardly talks to me. She's just as stubborn as you are," she fumed. "You said that last time. Why don't you ask the judge to reverse his decision and give her to me? I'd be happy to take her off your hands," I suggested. "You're not getting her. She needs a good school to accomplish something," Sophie snapped. "Oak Forest is a good school, and she loved it there," I countered. "It's nothing compared to Wilmette. She's getting a great education and meeting people who can help her in the future," Sophie argued. "Our daughter will make her own way in life. She doesn't need to ride on someone else's coattails," I insisted. "You're too stubborn to see the benefits," Sophie shot back. "Sophie, we've argued about this enough. You're not going to change my mind, and I won't change yours. Why are you here? I know it's not to bring Vicky to me." "Her name is Victoria, not Vicky," Sophie corrected. "Well, that's not what she wants to be called. Don't you want her to be independent?" I challenged. "You mean stubborn," Sophie retorted. "No, I mean independent, able to think for herself and decide what's right for her," I explained. "Anyway, I need spousal support payments. I have bills to pay," she demanded. "You'll have to pay them yourself. I can't access my funds while I'm incarcerated. No job, no paycheck," I replied. "What do you mean? I can't cover all the bills on my paycheck," she whined. "You should have thought of that before taking me to court," I said. "You acted like a jackass by paying in change," she accused. "Now you won't get paid at all because I'm in jail," I responded. "You must pay," she insisted. "No, I don't. What are they going to do? Put me in jail if I don't? I'm already here," I said. "What am I going to do about the bills?" she whined. "Get one of your lawyer buddies to help. You deserve it," I said. With those words, she stormed out. Vicky came in next, and I was overjoyed to see her. "Wow, you really pissed her off," she said. "She expects me to keep paying spousal support while I'm in jail. Good luck with that," I laughed. "How are you holding up, Dad?" "Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. How are you doing? I hear you're still not talking to your mom," I said. "Not much, just when I have to," she replied. "When are you getting out of here?" "Honey, I refuse to apologize to that bastard judge. I'll only apologize if he gives you back to me. I don't see that happening soon. I probably won't get out until my 6 months are up," I explained. "I understand," she said sadly. "You know, it's my birthday next month. I'd love for you to be out so we can celebrate. But I don't want you to go against your principles. We can celebrate when you get out." Her words tore at me. I began to reconsider my stance, realizing that being here was hurting my little girl. Then Vicky said something that put things into perspective. "If a man has no principles, he has nothing. As Abraham Lincoln said, important principles may and must be inflexible," she recited. "Where did you hear that?" I asked. "My counselor, Dr. Rivera, at school. It's great to have someone to talk to about all of this. Some teachers noticed my grades dropping and asked the counselor to talk to me. It's also helped me deal with Mom, although I still don't talk to her," Vicky explained. In a school system like Wilmette's, the counselor could be a doctor of psychology. These rich kids couldn't go to just any school counselor. "Your mom seems mad at you too," I noted. "Yeah, she's starting to annoy me. I just ignore her. I think it makes it worse, and I don't care," she said. "In a few months, she'll have to find a new place to live. The bank won't let the jumbo loan go unpaid for long. The mansion will probably be foreclosed within 3 months." "But Dad, if the house gets foreclosed, won't that hurt your reputation?" "Honey, when you buy things with cash, you don't worry about credit. That mansion was the only thing I took a loan for." "Really? Wow, Dad. Even with all your leases and businesses, you've never taken out a loan?" "I used the money from the others to buy new ones," I explained. "Daddy, I've always respected you, but now I respect you even more," she said with a smile. "Thank you, dear. You really know how to lift my spirits." It was a wonderful visit with my daughter. I wanted to be with her more regularly. Missing her birthday would be hard on both of us, but I knew she would be fine. She's a strong child. The following week, I learned that the security guard who hit me had been fired. It's hard to argue against a videotape showing me not even defending myself. A few days later, the other guard quit as well. I wasn't sure if he was transferred or just left, but at least he was gone. Several inmates thanked me for getting rid of the rotten guard, and I think I gained some respect because of it. Now more people were calling me Tex, and I didn't have much trouble after that. The 6 prisoners were still mad at me. I heard that one of their wives had filed for divorce, and 3 others had been dumped by their girlfriends. Maybe even stupid people can learn when faced with enough threats. My standing among the other prisoners had improved, and they knew they were better off doing nothing. A couple of weeks later, I received a subpoena to meet with the judge via video conference. I told the guard who came to fetch me that I would not meet with anyone without my lawyer present. "But the judge is already waiting," he said. "I don't care. I want my lawyer. Have him reschedule. My calendar is open," I replied. The guard hesitated, then turned and walked away. 3 days later, I was informed that the meeting was scheduled for the following week. I requested half an hour with my lawyer before the meeting to confer, and they set it up. My lawyer and I met to discuss the upcoming meeting. He told me he wasn't given any information about it, which seemed odd to him. "I guess we'll play it by ear," he said. When the judge appeared on the screen, it was clear he wasn't happy about being put off for a week, but I didn't care. In my mind, he was just a pompous trash who thought he was better than everyone else because he wore a robe. My attorney spoke almost immediately. "Your Honor, may I ask what this meeting is about? We weren't given any information. We were just told to be here." "Your client didn't need to involve you," the judge said. "I just wanted to know if he was willing to apologize to the court for his outburst." My lawyer looked at me, and I gestured for him to lean in. I whispered in his ear. "Your Honor," my attorney said, "he is unwilling to apologize and asks that you apologize to him. He also asks that you grant him primary custody of his daughter." The judge looked shocked. "How could I apologize? Of course I won't do that. My decision regarding the child stands, and I have nothing to apologize for," he declared. "Well then, we've wasted our time. If in the future my client decides to change his mind, we will request another audience." "Good day, sir," my lawyer said. "And one more thing," the judge added. Now we were getting to the real reason for the meeting. "Your client is not honoring the divorce decree. When does he plan to make the required spousal maintenance and mortgage payments?" My lawyer leaned toward me, and I whispered in his ear again. "Your Honor, he doesn't plan to make any payments while he's in custody," my lawyer said. "But his house will be foreclosed on," the judge said. "It's not my house. It might be my wife's mansion, but it's not my house. I never wanted to own it," I bluntly told the judge. "It will ruin your credit, and you will lose all your equity," he warned. "A small price to pay to see my favorite ex-wife walking down the street where she belongs," I replied. Then I added something I knew would piss him off. "Perhaps all her buddies can make the payments. I'm sure you all can find the money together." By insinuating that my wife was a slut and that he was one of her lovers, I knew he would fly into a rage. "You worthless piece of Southside scum! Who do you think you're talking to?" the judge bellowed. "I think I'm talking to the man who partook of my wife's body. If I'm wrong, I apologize. I just can't understand why someone who isn't involved would care so much," I said calmly. With these words, I got up and went to the door to be let out. As I was leaving, I heard the judge say, "Counselor, your client just earned himself 2 extra months in jail. If he continues to disrespect me, I will make his life a living hell." I smiled, waiting for the guard who was supposed to return me to my cell. The guard looked stunned, unable to believe what I had just done. When I got back to my cell, I was on edge. Apparently my wife had blabbed about the mortgage to her buddies, who in turn had talked to the judge. What a goddamn rat's nest. Their time will come soon enough. The next Sunday, Sophie couldn't resist coming to visit me in jail. Luckily, Vicky found out and made her bring her along. "I heard you pissed off the judge again and got 2 more months in jail. When are you going to learn you can't fight the system?" Sophie sneered. "Sophie, why don't you just talk to me anymore? All you're doing is showing off your Northside attitude." "I don't need that. All I need is for you to make sure Vicky visits me regularly," I said. "It's Victoria!" she practically screamed. I turned away and didn't speak to her. She kept cursing until she finally left. When Vicky came in, she had a huge smile on her face. "Why are you so happy?" I asked. "Because I'm going to see my daddy," she said. "That can't be the only reason," I replied. "I have a surprise for you, but I can't tell you what it is yet until I think it through." "Dad, do you trust me?" she asked. "With my life," I said. "Then will you sign this paper without reading it first?" She held out a folded piece of paper. I looked at her warily. "What are you up to?" "You'll have to wait and see. I thought you trusted me," she teased. I smiled and signed the paper without reading it. Mom said you did something to get your sentence extended for another 2 months. Is that true? She asked. Yes, I'm sorry, darling, I replied. What did you do? I confronted the judge again. Well, whatever you did, he probably deserved it, she said. We talked a little more about school and her mom. She kept mentioning Dr. Rivera and wondering what was going on. I tried to get her to tell me about her plans, but she said it should remain a surprise. I'm sorry I won't be at your 16th birthday party, but the next time you visit, I'll have a birthday present for you, I said. What is it? She asked. It's a surprise, so I guess we're both in for surprises, I replied. At the end of the visit, I asked Vicky to invite Brian to join me next time. Brian was my right-hand man, handling all my business affairs. Of course, Daddy, Vicky said when I asked her to invite him. Before I went to jail, I'd assigned Brian a few specific tasks, and I hoped he had managed them well. Now, I had one more job for him, a surprise birthday party for Vicky. At the end of the week, Brian came to visit. He had done quite a lot of what I had asked. I then asked him to prepare a special surprise for Vicky's birthday. Are you sure? He asked. Yes, it's the perfect gift for her, I assured him. Okay, I'll talk to our lawyer, he said. Also, visit my brother Ted and give him what you have. He'll know what to do. If he has any questions, have him come to me. If not, let him go to Gummies. Will do, Brian said, and left. I kept a smile on my face all day, knowing Gummy would get back at me while I remained guilt-free in jail. By the end of the month, my popularity among the prisoners had grown. A guard must have told someone about my confrontation with the judge, and word spread quickly. Soon, everyone was calling me Tex. Towards the end of the month, I had a visitor. I went into the room and saw Sophie sitting there. I was about to turn around and leave when she said, Ethan, please stop. I need to talk to you. I have nothing to say to you, Sophie, I replied. We're going to lose our house. You have to give me some money to stop the foreclosure, she pleaded. That's your house, Sophie. I never wanted it, but you kept pushing until I gave in. It means nothing to me, and with the market dropping, we don't have any equity. Let the bank take it. Ethan, you can't do this. You have to help me, she cried. Go ask your buddies for help. I'm sure they have enough money. Then you can really live up to being the whore you are, I retorted. Why are you doing this to me? She sobbed. Why did you lie and tell the judge that I was behaving inappropriately towards our daughter? She had no response. She realized she had wronged me. She cried, and I left. It felt good to let it all out. As I was being led back to my cell, the guard got a call to bring me back. I walked in expecting to see Sophie still crying and begging. Instead, Vicky was there. Vicky, your mom didn't tell me she brought you. I wouldn't let her come without me, she said. I'm sorry I missed your birthday, I said, but I have a present for you nonetheless. Dad, I knew you'd miss it, and I don't care. I love you anyway, and you don't have to give me a present, she said. What a wonderful daughter I have, I thought. I don't have it with me, but I can tell you what it is. Vicky, the house in Oak Forest belongs to you. It will go into a trust for you when you come of age. When I get out of here, can I stay there? She asked. Of course, I said. Her eyes widened, and a huge smile spread across her face. Daddy, my God, you just removed a huge obstacle that was keeping you from being surprised. I still can't tell you, but when I do, you'll understand. I love you so much. I love you too, honey, I replied. I was puzzled as to what this surprise was. It must have something to do with our home, not the mansion, but our real home. We both smiled as we continued our conversation. She started talking about Dr. Rivera, her counselor again. I wondered if she had a crush on him. I hoped he was professional and had no ulterior motives towards her. I would have to meet this Dr. Rivera guy as soon as I got out of here. As I was led back to my cell, I had a huge smile on my face, both from the verbal battle with Sophie and the wonderful conversation with Vicky. The other inmates were perplexed as to what I had done. They already knew that a smile meant someone was hurt. Gummy came to visit me one day. It's all set, he said. A video of your wife, other paralegals at her firm, some of them married, and prostitutes being entertained by most of the lawyers at the firm, as well as up-and-coming Democratic politicians and a certain judge you know well. They all bragged about being above the law and doing whatever they wanted. Surprisingly, people don't pay attention to hired help. Janitors can come and go as they please. For someone who cleans offices after hours, money talks. Free rent for a year speaks volumes. We had them install hidden cameras in conference rooms and offices. I knew I'd get enough evidence to upset a few lives. My brother, anonymously of course, would post videos online with the slogan "Don't mess with Texas." They would send them to strategic websites in every news outlet and tabloid in the state. Publications would be in a frenzy to create news out of this. Politicians and lawyers would frantically try to undo the fallout. I smiled and said, "In a week's time, go and let the others know what should happen next." "I will," he replied. As I walked back to my cell, I had another wide smile on my face. Razor saw it and realized I had just talked to Gummy. "Holy trash," he said. I just nodded and smiled even wider. I was lying in my bunk when the videotapes came out, and I could hear the murmurings going around the prison. Apparently, somehow the news had reached our little corner of hell. I began to hear people openly say, "Don't mess with Texas." A few minutes later, I was surprised when one of the big guys, one of the 6, came into my cell. "You're a bad bastard. I'm sorry for what I did to you," he said. "I told you all not to mess with me, that you'd regret it. Now more and more people regret crossing me. I return kindness for kindness and violence for violence. I hope you'll accept my apology." "Sure, just remember, being big doesn't mean you can't get hurt," I replied. He nodded and walked away. About 3 days later, I was called before the judge again. He had already contacted my lawyer, who was on his way. We sat in the video room while we waited for the judge to connect. "I wonder what this is about," my lawyer said with a smirk. "Only time will tell," I replied, smirking back. "Oh no," he muttered. When the judge came on screen, he looked at me with fire in his eyes. "You did it!" he shouted. "What are you talking about?" I asked in an impassive voice. "You're Tex, aren't you?" he yelled. "Some people call me that," I said calmly. "You're going to pay for this," he shouted again. "I've been in jail for the last 4 months. How could I have done anything?" I asked, not paying attention to his rage. "You have friends," he accused. "We all have friends, Your Honor," I said sarcastically. "You're not getting away with this," he spat. "I don't know, Judge. You may be out of a job soon, and I hear your wife is divorcing you. You better call off your dogs," I said. "Now you're calling my friends dogs? I'm not sure they'd appreciate that. You know, if you corner a dog, you might get bitten." "Are you threatening me?" he asked, incredulous. "No, just repeating an old adage," I said calmly. "I'm going to make your life a living hell. When you finally get out of this slimy prison, you better be on your guard. One day you'll have to answer to people who don't care about your life, and I'll be happy no matter what they do to you." With that, he cut the transmission. I turned to my lawyer. "Did you get that?" I asked. "Sure did," he said, holding up his phone. "More fuel for the fire. The Bar Association will be very interested in this. Intimidation is a criminal offense in Illinois." A few days later, another visitor came to see me. It was my wife again. "Oh, it's you. I thought I made it clear I had nothing more to say to you," I said coldly. "You bastard!" she shouted. "What are you talking about?" I asked calmly. "You got me fired. My picture is all over the news and the internet. How could you do this to me?" she whined. "You did it to yourself," I replied. "Do you hate me that much?" she asked. "Yeah, and all your law buddies who think they're better than everyone else," I spat back. "When we first met, you were a sweet small-town girl with a great personality. Now you're just an uptown bitch who loves no one but herself." "What am I going to do? I don't have a job, and no one will hire me now," she pleaded. "Move back to Seymour and live with your folks," I suggested. "I can't. The local paper had a headline, 'Local Girl at Center of Chicago Scandal.' My parents are planning to take early retirement and move to Florida to avoid the talk." "Looks like Florida's the right place for you. You'll be far away from me," I retorted. "They don't want to see me. They barely talk to me," she cried. "Wow, your parents barely want to talk to you, and your daughter barely talks to you. Maybe it's you," I said. "I think you should move and start over. But you better not take Vicky with you. As soon as I get out of here, I'll petition the court for primary custody. Given your reputation, they'll reconsider who is the best moral example for an impressionable girl." "You can't do that. She's all I have left," Sophie protested. "Sophie, I don't care. You did this to yourself. We had a good life, and then you started having fun with everyone. Hey, that's a thought. You could be a whore for one of your lawyer buddies. I'm sure there's a market for an almost 40-year-old A." She looked at me with nothing but pain in her eyes. She put her forehead on the table and just cried. Sucks to be you, I said. Did you bring Vicky? I asked. She practically exploded. It's Victoria. And no, she's doing something with this doctor friend of hers. Well, then I have nothing more to say to you. Don't come back unless you bring Vicky. I turned and walked away as she fumed. This time there was no smile on my face. I actually felt sorry for her. She was broken. The next day I saw a news report. Apparently, the top floor of a 5-story office building in the center of town had caught fire. Thanks to the sprinkler system, the bottom 4 floors were saved, but the top floor was gutted. I just smiled. Ted visited the next day and told me that the law firm's external server had crashed and all their data had been lost. Again, I just smiled. A couple of weeks later, I had another visitor. It was Vicky. She must have convinced her mother to bring her. She walked in with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Vicky, you look incredibly happy. What's going on? I asked. I finally finished my surprise for you. You'll never guess what it is, she said. Well, from our last conversation, I know it has something to do with the house in Oak Forest. Don't tell me you and Mom moved there. I know she'd rather live anywhere but there, I said. You're half right, she said, looking pleased with herself. Mom is being evicted from the Wilmette house, and I'm moving into the Oak Forest house. How can you do that? By court order, she has primary custody of you until you're of age, I asked, puzzled. Surprise! I'm legally an adult now, she said, beaming. I achieved emancipation. That's what Dr. Rivera and I have been working on for the last 2 months. Once you put the house in trust, everything fell into place for me. I needed somewhere safe to live, and our old neighborhood is perfect for that. Are you really considered an adult now? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. Yes. When I started having problems at school, mostly because of problems at home, Dr. Rivera helped me solve that issue. Once you get out of here, you can come home. I can't wait to go back to high school in Oak Forest. I've already talked to a lot of my old friends. They can't wait for summer to end and school to start, she said excitedly. Mom told me you were spending time with a counselor. I'd like to meet this Dr. Rivera guy, I said. I still had my doubts about how much attention this grown man was paying to my daughter. Well, you're in luck. Dr. Rivera brought me here today, she said. Now I was really starting to worry. He's driving her around Chicago, I thought. I'll be right back, she said, heading for the door. I needed to assess the situation. How could I tactfully let Dr. Rivera know he was crossing a fine line without upsetting my daughter? I wanted to put the fear of God into him. When Vicky walked back through the door, she was followed not by a man, but by a gorgeous woman with raven hair. She smiled at me and asked, How are you doing? I looked at her carefully. Sam? I asked in disbelief. I haven't heard that name in about 20 years, she replied. Sam, or rather Samantha, was from my neighborhood. She didn't hang out with my gang, but we went to school together. Vicky looked puzzled. Daddy, how do you know Dr. Rivera? Sam, or Samantha as I now realized, answered before I could. We grew up in the same neighborhood. He didn't notice me much back then. I turned to Vicky. She was a couple of years behind me in school, and we didn't really hang out in the same circles. And you were a bit of a troublemaker back then, Samantha added with a smile. I see not much has changed. You're still finding ways to get into trouble. I flushed slightly. Yeah, I still have a problem keeping my mouth shut. Seems like it, she teased. Should I call you Tex? Vicky asked. Why do you call him that? Vicky inquired. That was his nickname when he was a teenager, Samantha explained. He was known for not letting anyone mess with him. Your mom definitely crossed him, and I bet all this chaos at the law firm is his doing. Guilty as charged, I admitted with a grin. Before we go any further, I hope you don't mind me spending time with Victoria, Samantha said. Vicky, my daughter corrected firmly. Sorry, I forgot, Samantha said. When I first started talking to Vicky about 9 months ago, she was very upset about everything happening in her life. I was curious if she was related to you and Ted, since Marquez isn't a common last name. When I looked into her records and found out her father's name was Ethan, I still wasn't sure. I always knew you as Tex, but when she told me you were in prison, I knew it had to be you. I felt bad, but also realized you must have changed and done well for yourself if you had a house in Wilmette. It's just a house. It was never a home, I said. Vicky chimed in. Yeah, our real home is in Oak Forest. South Side, But in a much nicer part than where we grew up, Samantha added. Yeah, if we had stayed there, maybe things would be different now, I said wistfully. If Sophie had been happy with our home, we might still be together. We chatted some more, and then I took Samantha aside. Thank you for helping Vicky. It means a lot to me that she's got someone looking out for her, I said. It's my pleasure, Tex. Vicky's like family to me now. I'm happy to help, Samantha replied. When I get out of here, I owe you a big dinner, I said. I'll hold you to that, she said with a smile. The next couple of weeks passed uneventfully, following the usual prison routine. Vicky and Samantha visited every Sunday. It pleased me to see Samantha taking Vicky under her wing. Vicky mentioned that Samantha helped her decorate the house, buying new furniture and decorations. Where did the money come from? I asked. Uncle Ted, of course. I have money set aside for my needs, she replied. I just didn't want anyone to think Samantha was footing the bill. She's been a great help, but she didn't buy anything. Don't worry, Dad. Your man cave is still intact, she reassured me, referring to the basement I had turned into my private retreat. Living with two women sometimes required a bit of solitude. When they left, I lay on my bunk, reflecting on how much Vicky had grown. She was now legally an adult. Soon she'd be off to college and then who knows where. I hoped to find someone who appreciated the simple things in life. On Monday, I had another visitor, Sophie. As soon as I saw her, I turned to leave, but she called out, Ethan, wait, we need to talk. I turned back reluctantly. Now what? I thought. Do you know what our daughter did? She asked, clearly distressed. What are you talking about, Sophie? I replied. She got emancipated. She doesn't have to live with either of us anymore. She's already moved out, and I have no idea where she is. Oh, that, I said nonchalantly. So you know. Did you put her up to it? She accused. No, she did it on her own. The school counselor helped her. Where is she staying? With the counselor? Sophie demanded. No, she's back home. She moved back to the south side. What about school? She asked, exasperated. She'll be back at Oak Forest in the fall, I replied. She hated Wilmette. She was always looked down on for being a kid from the projects, as they called it. She never fit into that high society life. You took her out of a school she loved, where she had friends, and put her in a place that damaged her self-esteem. I was just trying to ensure she got a good education, Sophie defended herself. Kids learn more from their parents than from any school. What do you think your actions have taught her? I retorted. I hope she learns what not to do. Our job was to raise a responsible adult. I hope she can see past our failures, especially our marriage, Sophie said softly. It wasn't all bad, she added. No, but it ended badly, Sophie. I hope you find what you're looking for. Clearly, I wasn't it. I saw sadness and regret in her eyes as I walked away. Finally, the day of my release arrived. This time, I was summoned to a real court. Vicky and Samantha were there, as well as Sophie. As I sat waiting for the judge, I wondered what would happen. I still wasn't going to apologize. The bailiff ordered us to rise, and we stood as the judge entered. It wasn't the same judge. Maybe the other one had lost his job. The new judge reviewed my case, then looked at me. So, Mr. Marquez, what do you have to say for yourself? I took a deep breath. I've served my original 6 months plus 2 more. At any time, you could have apologized and walked free, he pointed out. I didn't believe the other judge deserved my apology, I replied. So I served the time. You are a stubborn man, Mr. Marquez. I prefer to call it strong-willed. It's helped me succeed in business and in life, I said. As for your divorce agreement, it remains in effect. You will have to pay compensation for the months you did not honor it, the judge declared. My attorney then spoke. Your Honor, my client will gladly pay what he owes. We estimate it to be just under $20,000, which he will generously pay in full today, with the understanding that this settles his financial obligations, and he will not be required to make further payments. Sophie shot to her feet, exclaiming, What? You owe me more than that. You have to keep paying until Victoria turns 18. The judge held up a hand. Miss, I handle the transactions in my courtroom. Counselor, how did you arrive at that figure? Your Honor, my attorney began, my client covered the down payment of spousal support, mortgage, and insurance, and provided for his daughter's support. He continued paying for his daughter's insurance and maintenance while incarcerated. However, he did not pay his ex-wife's spousal support or mortgage because he was unable to work or receive a paycheck. Now that he can work again, he can start earning money. The judge examined the documents. Your client has been incarcerated for 8 months. Spousal support alone would be $16,000, not to mention mortgage payments. Your Honor, the judgment specifies until the minor child becomes an adult. The child in question was emancipated 3 months ago. The legal documents are in your possession. Additionally, the house was foreclosed 3 months ago, eliminating any mortgage payments. Therefore, the amount owed is $1,782. My client is willing to pay $20,000 to terminate all financial obligations. The judge reviewed the documents and figures. If this data is correct, I will accept this figure. Both of you have a child together, now legally an adult, but still a teenager with needs. Both of you must remain civil for her well-being. Can I have your word on that, Mr. Marquez? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. Mrs. Marquez? Yes, Your Honor, she said. The judge nodded. And Vicky? Vicky. But yes, Your Honor, she said. Then, unless the data proves false, this case is closed. Mr. Marquez, you may go. Thank you, Your Honor, my attorney replied. We stood and headed for the exit. Vicky ran up to me and gave me a big hug. Samantha stood back, smiling. I saw Sophie watching us. Sophie approached me, seething. $20,000? That's it? That's BS. Why did you choose them over me? They can't help you get back on your feet. You can't do this to me. Sophie, the judge asked us to be civil. Let's do it for Vicky's sake. It's Victoria, Sophie hissed. Our daughter, okay? What are you going to do now? I asked. I have no job, no place to live, nothing, she cried. You can find another job and apply for housing. I can put you in one of my apartments rent-free for 6 months so you can get back on your feet. You want me to move back to the South Side? She whined. It's free rent. How can that be bad? I replied. Sophie turned away, frustrated. I turned to Vicky and Samantha. Ladies, are you ready to go? Of course, they both said. Samantha, I owe you a nice dinner, I said. I think I remember something like that, she said with a smile. Let's go to PM Italian. I made reservations when I got confirmation of my release date. I really need to cleanse my palate of prison food, I joked. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sophie fuming. It was our special restaurant. The table is booked for 6:30, so we have some time. Do you mind if we drive around a bit? I just need to get used to my freedom. I then turned to Samantha. I made a reservation for 4. Could you call your husband and see if he's available? Samantha fell silent, her face becoming expressionless. Vicky said, Daddy, she doesn't have a husband anymore. I was confused. Every time we interacted, she wore her wedding ring. I'm sorry, Samantha, if I offended you. You didn't know, she replied. My husband was killed in an accident on the Eisenhower Highway about 5 years ago. Some car swerved and drove into the divider. He died instantly. I'm so sorry, Samantha. I just assumed you were still married since you wear the rings. Yeah, I can't bring myself to take them off yet. Somehow it feels like I'd be letting him go. Well, I'm very sorry. Please join us for dinner. I'd like to make it up to you. She looked grim but said, I think it will be okay. I realized I had been so focused on my own problems and revenge that I hadn't even asked about her life. I felt like such an A. I had to change that, starting tonight. I would be willing to listen to anything she wanted to tell me about who she was now and how she got to this point. I would become a better friend. The dinner was fantastic. It was so nice to wear regular clothes and not have to be constantly on guard. The freedom felt a little strange after 8 months, but by the end of dinner, I felt better. I took a chance and said to Samantha, when you're ready, will you let me take you out on a real date? I don't care how long it takes, when it's convenient for you. But in the meantime, can we stay in touch? Daddy, of course, will keep in touch. She's not getting rid of me that easily, Vicky said. And I wouldn't want it any other way, Samantha added. Mike and I never had children. I was in school, and he was starting his business. It wasn't the right time. Vicky has been like a surrogate daughter. It's been very therapeutic. I hope you don't mind. After everything you've done for both of us, I wouldn't want it any other way, I said. As we were leaving the restaurant, Vicky said, I hope you like the view of our old house. Anything would be better than where I've been for the last 8 months, I chuckled. When we got there, I was surprised. The shutters were painted, the bushes trimmed. It looked great from the outside, and I couldn't wait to see inside. When I stepped in, everything looked different. but it felt more like home than ever before. Samantha's touch was everywhere. I know it sounds corny, but I cried. This hardened criminal was crying. "Ethan," I heard Samantha say. I wiped my eyes and said, "I feel at home." "Ethan," said Samantha, "I think I'm ready." I looked at her puzzled. She took off her rings and smiled at me. I couldn't help but smile back, and then we hugged. Epilogue. 10 attorneys, 4 paralegals, 6 politicians, and a judge had their careers and marriages destroyed because of the events leading up to my divorce and its aftermath. Stubbornness or willpower, either way, sometimes you have to stand up for your principles. On the other hand, Vicky gained a new mother and a new brother and sister. They were twins. As for Sophie, she married a wealthy lawyer. I think she finally got what she wanted. I thought we had everything: a loving family, a nice house, a healthy child, and a successful business. But for her, we lacked status. Now she has status, married to a wealthy attorney, living in a big house in Winnetka. She also has a misogynistic husband who doesn't love her but keeps her around for appearances. I hope she's happy. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.